Most people picture the classic avoidant partner as an unbreakable fortress. They picture someone cold, fiercely self-reliant, and totally untouched by emotional distance. They walk away the moment things get deep, leaving anxious partners confused and hurting behind them. They win the game of emotional chess because they act like they simply do not care that much. Or at least, that is the story they tell themselves, just to get through the day. For 99% of people, that wall of defense holds up just fine. It keeps everyone at arm's length and leaves the avoidant fully in charge of the emotional thermostat. But there is a rare psychological anomaly that does not just get around these heavy defenses, it tears them apart completely. This is not your typical people-pleasing empath who begs for love and feeds the avoidant's need for power. This is the dark, analytical empath. When an avoidant runs into this particular kind of person, the whole power dynamic flips on its head. The silent treatment, the subtle withholding, the tiny rejections, all of it gets turned right back around on them. The analytical empath does not spiral or panic when distance shows up. Instead, they read the silence like it's an open book. They look straight past the cold act and spot the exact childhood wound driving it. They see the hidden fear hiding behind a mask of indifference. What comes next is a masterclass in psychological reversal. Because this empath understands the mechanics of human behavior, they never chase. They stay perfectly still and mirror the space with total calm, quietly disarming the avoidant's main weapon. Pay close attention because if you miss even one piece of this breakdown, you will completely miss how deep this kind of programming actually runs. The avoidant, who normally walks away without shedding a single tear, suddenly unravels, breaks their own rules, and ends up begging for another chance. This is the hidden blueprint behind that exact moment. Today, we are setting aside the usual surface-level relationship advice to dig into the raw operational psychology behind why this one empath type brings an avoidant to their knees. Take a closer look at the person who always runs and uses silence like a sharp blade to cut off connection. In behavioral profiling, that is not a sign of true strength at all. It is a rigid, predictable script. The avoidant partner believes they hold all the power because they can sit in cold isolation longer than you can stand it. They feed off your panic and anxiety to feel secure in their position. But right now, you are about to learn about the one personality type that makes the entire avoidant playbook useless. If you stay with me through this whole breakdown, you will see exactly how this kind of human programming gets flipped upside down. You will spot the hidden cracks inside the avoidant mind and understand why this particular empath rebuilds them from the inside out. If you skip ahead or miss any part of this breakdown, you will stay trapped in the anxious avoidance cycle forever, completely blind to the way out. Let's look at how this dynamic usually plays out in everyday life. The average person meets an avoidant and tries to close the growing gap with extra warmth. They send longer messages, ask for detailed explanations, and try twice as hard to build a bridge. But every single one of those moves feeds the avoidant's subconscious mind fresh proof. That proof tells them they are still fully in control, still the ultimate prize, and completely safe from ever being trapped, because they can push people away anytime they choose. Then, the analytical empath walks into the picture. This person does not soak up negative energy and fall apart in a corner. They carry high cognitive empathy, meaning they don't just feel emotions, they map them out like a clear diagram. They notice normal baseline behavior, subtle shifts in tone, and quick changes in body language. When the avoidant starts pulling away, the analytical empath feels zero panic. Their heart rate stays even, their body stays loose, and their mind stays clear. They don't see a threat, they simply see an old defense mechanism kicking back in. What happens when a complex machine doesn't get the input it's expecting? It simply crashes with a system error. When the avoidant pulls back expecting a desperate chase, the analytical empath offers pure, quiet silence right back. But this isn't the petty, angry silence of someone playing games. It's a peaceful, unbothered, and genuinely supportive kind of space. Without saying a word, the empath tells them that if they need room, they are free to take as much as they want. This unexpected response breaks the avoidant's predictive internal wiring. Suddenly, the distance they built stops feeling like a safe fortress and starts feeling like an isolated prison cell. That quick hit of dopamine they usually get from being chased simply disappears. For the first time in a long while, the avoidant is left completely alone with the one thing they've been running from their whole life, their own unfiltered mind. Stay with me here, because what comes next turns their entire world upside down. The analytical empath understands that avoidance is just an old survival strategy. It's a primitive program built back in childhood to protect a young person whose feelings were constantly brushed aside, judged, or ignored. Because this empath operates with calm, precise intelligence, they never waste energy arguing with surface-level excuses. When the avoidant claims they're simply too busy or just not ready for commitment right now, the average partner tries to counter with logic and schedules. The analytical empath instead watches the tiny micro-expressions on their face, the fast split-second flicker in their eyes, and the slight dip in their voice. They see the real truth underneath, a deep fear of being unworthy and getting rejected. When the empath finally speaks, they don't talk to the mask. They speak directly to the hidden child underneath, using clear, simple words that quietly take apart the whole defense system. They say calm, simple things like, "You don't need to pull away or put on a show to prove you're safe with me, because I am never going to trap you, and I am never going to chase you." That one statement completely breaks the avoidant's internal logic. Avoidants spend their entire lives building thick walls against people who try to smother them or people who will eventually leave. They have no defense at all against someone who understands them fully, asks for nothing back, and stays completely unshakable. The power dynamic shifts for good. The same avoidant who used to take days to reply to a simple text suddenly becomes fixated on the empath. The uncertainty flips completely. The avoidant starts checking their phone constantly, going over every little detail of the empath's behavior, looking for a crack of weakness or panic. But they find nothing except a calm, steady mirror reflecting their own actions right back at them. Eventually, the weight of their own buried feelings starts piling up inside. The fortress they built to protect themselves turns into a tight prison, and the only way out is through the exact door the analytical empath has left open. They don't just come back to the relationship. They come back without their ego, ready to be honest, completely humbled by the one force they could never outrun, being truly seen and truly understood. To understand why this specific empath breaks through so easily, we need to tear down the popular myth of avoidant independence. Most people assume an avoidant is genuinely self-sufficient. They watch someone cut off a deep bond in a single day or hold extreme silence without flinching, and they assume this person has incredible inner strength. They assume the avoidant is an unbreakable rock. But in true behavioral analysis, a giant stone wall isn't a sign of real strength at all. It's a massive monument built on top of pure fear. The strong, quiet front the avoidant shows the world is actually a fragile illusion. It's a temporary shield built to keep people far away because their inner foundation can't handle real vulnerability. This entire setup depends on a predictable pattern. It assumes that everyone they pull away from will react the exact same frantic way. When the avoidant steps back, typical human programming causes the partner to feel a rush of panic. The partner sends message after message, demands reasons, begs for reassurance, and keeps chasing without stopping. To the avoidant's subconscious mind, this frantic pursuit is the ultimate proof that they're safe. It sends them clear signals confirming two things. First, that they won't get trapped because they've already created distance. And second, that the partner is still hooked on them and isn't going anywhere. This dynamic builds a broken reward loop where the avoidant feels strong and secure precisely because their partner is falling apart. They use your emotional chaos to settle their own internal storm. They play a game of emotional control where they always come out ahead simply by pretending they care less than they do. But because this behavior is purely reactive instead of genuine confidence, it's fundamentally weak underneath. The The whole independent persona depends entirely on someone else playing the role of the desperate chaser. Take the chaser out of the equation, and the avoidance illusion of power falls apart instantly. Their independence isn't a real source of strength. It's an echo chamber that needs the sound of your panic to feel real. When they meet someone who won't make that noise, their armor gets tested for the very first time. Without your pursuit to validate them, their cold attitude turns into deep confusion. They're forced to see that their entire defense system is hollow, built completely on dodging childhood fears of rejection instead of any real self-sufficiency. They come to realize that the walls meant to keep others out have actually trapped them inside a dark, lonely room with no protection at all against someone who can see the frightened child hiding underneath. This brings us to the exact tool the analytical empath uses: cold, clear thinking mixed with deep understanding. Typical descriptions of empaths paint them as sensitive people pleasers who absorb everyone else's stress and lose themselves in the process. That emotionally reactive kind of empath is an easy target for an avoidant who can use their anxiety to stay in charge. But the analytical empath belongs to a completely different category of human behavior. This person carries deep emotional intelligence, but it runs through clear logic. They don't just feel what you feel, they decode every single signal. They don't see human connection as an emotional wave to get swept up in, but as a system of patterns, subtext, and clear mechanics. Where a typical empath sees withdrawal as painful rejection and spirals, the analytical empath treats it as raw data. Their heart rate stays steady, their thinking stays sharp, and their confidence stays intact because they never take the distance personally. To them, it's just a routine response to closeness. This mindset gives them a huge edge over the avoidance' usual tricks. Because they process emotion through logic, they're basically immune to the emotional smoke screens avoidants rely on. When an avoidant turns to cold silence or subtle little rejections, the analytical empath reads those moves like simple code. They separate the defensive performance from what's actually true underneath. They see that the avoidant isn't superior or calm at all, but deeply anxious and struggling to manage their own internal stress. This realization flips the entire dynamic. The analytical empath stays so grounded that the avoidant simply can't trigger a chase, cutting off the fuel their coping mechanism depends on. By staying anchored and watchful, the empath turns the whole situation into a calm space for observation. They quietly map out the avoidant's childhood rules, hidden triggers, and inner cracks, all without letting their own peace get shaken. It's the ultimate blend of deep human insight and rock-solid stability, creating an environment where the avoidant's usual tools simply stop working, leaving them completely exposed to someone who understands them better than they understand themselves. The relational world of the avoidant runs on an unspoken law of physics. For every step of emotional withdrawal, there has to be an equal and opposite step of desperate pursuit. This is what keeps their internal reward loop of control balanced. When the avoidant pulls back, the frantic chase from an anxious partner gives their brain a powerful payoff, reinforcing their false sense of safety and dominance. But when they try that same strategy on a dark, analytical empath, they run headfirst into a devastating countermove: the absolute law of non-reaction. This one shift short-circuits the avoidant's internal wiring completely. When the avoidant retreats into their usual silence, expecting the familiar wave of panicked texts, long messages, or tearful calls, what they get instead is pure, unbothered, quiet space. This isn't an angry, passive-aggressive silence meant to win some petty standoff. It's a relaxed, supportive kind of space that gives the avoidant every bit of the distance they claim to want. This total lack of resistance breaks the avoidant's internal compass. Human beings get a strong sense of validation from the friction they create in other people. If you yank hard on a rope and the person on the other end simply lets go, you lose your balance and stumble backward instantly. Without the anxious chase to confirm their retreat, the distance the avoidant built stops feeling like a position of power and control. It suddenly starts feeling like a cell of isolation. The quick dopamine hit they normally get from being chased disappears entirely, replaced by a sudden, jarring emptiness. The avoidant subconscious throws an error. Because reality no longer matches the script running in their head, they're left completely alone with the one thing they've spent their whole life avoiding, their own unfiltered thoughts and the frightening void of their inner world. This non-reaction also strips the avoidant of their usual excuse for ending the connection. In typical dynamics, an avoidant justifies pulling away by pointing to their partner's panicked reactions and labeling them crazy, needy, or smothering. This lets them pretend they're the calm, rational one in the room. But the analytical empath's steady presence takes that easy exit away from them completely. There's no emotional drama to point at, no loud meltdown to use as ammunition, and no pressure to push back against. The empath's calm energy acts like a clear, unshakable mirror, reflecting the avoidant's own inner panic straight back at them. As the days go by without a chase, the avoidant's initial relief slowly turns into a quiet, creeping anxiety that's hard to shake off. They start to notice that the heavy doors to their fortress are wide open, and yet nobody is trying to break in. That's when the hard truth sets in. While they believed they were exercising ultimate power by walking away, they were actually just allowed to leave without any resistance at all. This total reversal of what they expected knocks out their psychological footing, causing their whole defense system to collapse under the weight of its own uselessness. To understand how the analytical empath cuts through these thick layers of emotional armor, we need to look closer at the mechanics of behavioral mapping. To the average person, the avoidance cold mask looks like a solid, impenetrable wall. They take the dismissive comments and distant body language at face value, assuming the avoidant genuinely doesn't care about them. But to the analytical empath, that mask isn't a wall at all. It's a live stream of raw information. Because this empath tracks behavior with real precision, they ignore the performance entirely and watch for the small slips that leak through the cracks. They study the person's baseline, the slight tightening around the jaw whenever closeness comes up, the tiny fraction of a second asymmetry in a forced smile, and the quick drop in eye contact whenever real warmth is offered. These aren't random little twitches. They're data points, quietly revealing a deeply hidden state of inner panic. The analytical empath collects these clues and pieces to gather the exact childhood script driving the whole pattern. They understand that extreme avoidance is never a conscious choice. It's an old survival script written early in life to protect a child whose basic emotional needs were consistently dismissed, mocked, or ignored by the people meant to care for them. When the avoidant reaches for a standard excuse, like claiming they're simply too busy for commitment right now, the average partner tries to argue the logistics of their schedule, completely wasting their energy. The analytical empath skips that pointless debate entirely. They skip past the surface excuse and go straight for the underlying childhood wound, that deep, terrifying fear of being controlled, consumed, and eventually thrown away. Armed with this accurate psychological map, the analytical empath doesn't bother attacking the avoidance defensive wall. Instead, they speak directly to the hidden child underneath the armor, using words so simple, clear, and free of emotional demands that the avoidance defenses lose their footing entirely. They look at the avoidant and offer complete clarity without a trace of manipulation. This steady approach proves to the avoidance subconscious that this particular partner can't be pulled into a toxic game, provoked into a fight, or forced to chase. For the first time in their life, the avoidant finds themselves somewhere their usual hiding spots simply don't work anymore. They realize the cold persona they spent decades building is completely transparent to this person. The sheer shock of being accurately read without judgment, criticism, or begging tears a massive hole in their emotional wall, leaving them exposed to a kind of closeness they've spent their entire life avoiding. This leads straight into the final phase, the activation of what we might call the psychological inversion matrix, where the avoidant shifts from total emotional dominance to full hyperfixation and eventual surrender. In the early stages of pulling away, the avoidant sits comfortably in the seat of power, withholding affection and setting the emotional temperature of the whole dynamic. But once the empath's non-reaction fully takes hold, something breaks inside the avoidant's mind. The expected feedback loop of a panicking partner just isn't there, and that missing piece creates a massive psychological vacuum that human nature can't stand. The avoidance brain, desperate to regain its footing and prove its defenses still work, is forced to actively go looking for the missing pieces. This is the exact moment the hunter turns into the hunted. The avoidant starts doing small investigative things they'd normally consider beneath them. They find themselves opening messaging apps to check if the other person is active, watching for subtle hints on social media, or scrolling back through old messages trying to pinpoint the exact moment they lost their grip. Every check turns up the same flat baseline. The analytical empath stays fully composed, unbothered, and whole all on their own. This total lack of reaction sets off serious cognitive dissonance inside the avoidant. Their core belief is that they're the ultimate prize, the one who walks away, the one who controls the room. When reality keeps contradicting that story over and over, their mind shifts from casual indifference into intense fixation. This obsession doesn't come from some sudden, healthy kind of love. It's driven by a desperate need to fix the anomaly in front of them. They simply cannot accept that someone looked at their absence and chose calm peace over panic and pleading. As this fixation deepens, something remarkable happens inside them, a full internal reversal. The avoidant's own buried, anxious wiring gets pushed to the surface by the sheer weight of the empath's calm absence. The very tool they've always used to protect themselves, emotional distance, now flips into an agonizing preview of their deepest fear, total, unfiltered rejection. They start feeling the same physical and emotional symptoms they used to hand out to others. Their heart rate jumps every time a notification pops up, their sleep starts falling apart, and their thoughts become completely wrapped around the empath's steady, quiet presence. The grand illusion of their independent strength shatters completely, forcing them to see that their power was never real to begin with. It was nothing more than a parasite that needed someone else's desperation to survive. Now, facing an unshakable, clear-eyed boundary, they have absolutely no leverage left to work with. The final stage is the full collapse of the ego. A complete system shutdown where the enormous pressure of their buried feelings finally becomes too heavy to carry alone. The avoidant can't keep up the story of their cold independence any longer because the whole system has gone without validation for far too long. When they finally break their own strict rules and reach back out, it isn't with a casual check-in or some small breadcrumb. They come back with their armor completely gone, speaking with a raw honesty they've spent their whole life running from, utterly humbled by the one partner who simply refused to play the game.